be as soon as 20 years from now that you are living in a radically different world where that's about to change in 2025, and it won't change for everybody. There will still be people who are afraid. So you are in the early imprint phase of AI. And what will happen over the next 5 years with AI will set up. We did go so far as to say, in answer to Regina's questions, that we do not believe it is a good idea for young people, particularly those under the age of their early 20s, to go through too many biological modifications for a couple of reasons. This at the beginning of 2025, which is going to be a mastery year on Earth, a mastery year on Earth. This means
Hey everybody, our mission here at the Heart Coherence Collaborative is to get people in touch with the healing power of the heart.
And we really need your help. Right now, only 1% of viewers subscribe. We are aiming to take that number to 6%.
The reason why we want to do that is the more people that subscribe, the more people in the world can learn the magical practice of heart coherence.
So please help us out. If you ever listened, if you love this message, please just take a moment to subscribe.
Thank you so much.
We love.
Welcome everybody to the Heart Coherence Collaborative. We are so happy and excited and honored to have our good friend Lee Harris back with us today. Welcome back, Lee.
Welcome back.
thank you.
Yeah, so we were planning this interview for a while, but we found out yesterday that Lee has a new book coming out called The Future Human. So I got my hands on it yesterday and I literally have not stopped reading it. And I'm not just saying this. These are the best books, man. Every time you come out with a new book, for some reason, it resonates with me so deeply, I can't put it down. The Z's are incredible. Meredith, the way she asks the Z's questions is incredible. And the way you just show up is amazing. So we'd love to just hear, who is this future human and what inspired you to write this book?
Thank you. Thank you. You've always so supportive of the book, so thank you for that. Well, you know, so Regina Meredith and I, we've known each other. So for those who don't know Regina, she has a show on Gaia TV called Open Minds, and she's had that show for over a decade, and it's one of the most popular shows at Gaia TV. But before that, she set up something called Conscious Media Network. So Regina was a traditional journalist in the 80s, and then became very passionate about everything alternative, everything from health and food and nutrition through to UFOs. And then later she got really into the power systems of our world and how they work, and looking into ancient civilizations. So I think many of your community will be very familiar with Regina just because she's interviewed everybody over the years. So I've probably done her show maybe 10 times, and we've become friends over the years. And we've always said we wanted to collaborate in some way. And she loves talking to the Z's. So because I'd done this conversation format before and with other people over the years, we said, why don't we do this? And we had a brainstorm, and Regina threw some ideas around, and the future human was what felt true to us, because we said there's a lot of anxiety at the moment. And even though, as someone who works with future timelines as an intuitive, it's something I've always been able to tap into. I know that the future can change, and I know that we can alter the course of things. Regina was very passionate about some of these topics that she's been speaking to everybody about over the years. She said, I'd love to just talk to the Z's about them. So I said, okay. So we actually had like a marathon 3.5-day recording session in England, which doesn't sound that long because we were only recording for probably 3 hours a day. But I have to say, as a channeler, 3 hours a day of channeling kind of wallops you. So by day 3, I was like, I was not. I borrowed my sister's car to drive to the studio. My sister lives in England, and I managed to ding her car in the car park, which I never do. And I managed, on the same day, I stabbed my hand, I burnt my hand. It was like, I was like, okay, you are not in your body because this is too much. So I took an Uber the next day. So it was, even Regina said she felt very, it was reassuring for me that she also felt very altered by the recordings, because really what she did was, with her questions, she cast, the coming decades into the questions. So I'm curious to see how people respond to it. My Portal community already received the recordings, and we actually had a publishing delay. So the book should have been out this year, but now it's going to be out March 18th of 2025 in North America. So yeah, it's exciting. I'm thrilled that you've managed to get through most of it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
The Z's go like deep. Anybody listening, you have to get this book when it comes out, because the Z's go so deep in every aspect on what that future human is going to look like. I don't even know if you remember, like, because you channel it. So I don't know if you've recalled all this, but you go in so much depth about exactly what the future human's going to be. And a lot of it has to do with the heart, which we love.
We always love that at the Heart Coherence Collaborative.
Yeah.
And I just want to say, first of all, I would like to nominate Kyle Boyd to be the next interviewer for our next book, because
That would be
nobody
amazing.
who could do it better or would be more excited. So
Yeah, I don't know if I
Disease-
could contain myself though, so that might be a problem.
Fantastic. I love it.
Yeah, just slipping that in. Just I
I did not
nominate.
know she was going to say that.
He didn't put me into this.
Leah, I'll give you $100 if you.
But it goes into really just every aspect that you'd be interested in. And the thing that I want to start off with, which is kind of random, but I thought it was cool. And I have been both reading the book and also listening to it at double speed. So I actually have been listening to it up until I got here, and I realized like I'm in double speed. So I'm going to try to slow it down for these questions. But towards the end, the Z's were talking about Atlantis and what actually happened with Atlantis and how that also connects to some of our future. And I'd love to hear, I don't know if I'm the only one, but Atlantis is like one of those first little like weird things that you heard of when you were younger, like before it was cool to talk about Pleiadians or like, weird stuff.
Yeah.
So I've been always so interested in Atlantis, what happened, and then the Z's connected to the future.
Yeah, and it's interesting, I wish Regina was here, because she would be able to tell you what most people say about Atlantis. One of the things I do is I try and avoid researching things because of the channeling, and there are lots of things that come through the channeling that I don't fully understand. So I'm not someone who can give you the potted history of Atlantis, but I can tell you what I have learned over the years and the pieces that I remember. So the significance of Atlantis for those of us who are embodied right now is many of us will either have existed there, or we have a connection to what was birthed there. And even though Atlantis became out of balance over time and lost its core, which is why ultimately it fell, what they were very good at and what they were pioneers at was energy technology. So they were very advanced in how they understood what we as human, and not just human, the energy field of the live being. And they were very good at that. They were very good at working with that. They were very good at maneuvering that. And it's an interesting thing to consider when I often feel for myself, I'm 48 years old, so I was a 1976 birth. And I did not grow up with spiritual parents or parents who were teaching me any of this stuff. So I'm quite typical, I think, for most people, that I grew up only believing in the human game, but knowing something was wrong, knowing, I acted out in my childhood. That was my way of coping with it. And I also turned it on myself. What I was feeling, this dysmorphic sense that there's more to the story than what we're being told we are, and that what we're being told we can be. So for me, whenever Atlantis comes up, it always takes me right back into the power of who we are as energy beings, which I think you can hear that and go, oh yeah, lovely, I remember I'm an energy being, and that's great. The problem or the conflict for us comes in trying to be that in this world, and I think obviously last week, we're talking in November. I know this will be broadcast later to other people, but I think it's been interesting to watch the collective energy in the last couple of weeks on the planet around what you might call the human political game.
Mm.
And it's been hard to watch all of that low vibration playing out and having a big fight, and more importantly, how it then affects us afterwards. So one way to deal with it is to go, I'm an energy being, I'm having a spiritual experience, and we can all connect into that. Most of us can. But it doesn't mean that your human isn't also impacted. It doesn't mean that the part of you and all the people around you, many of whom may only believe in that story as the reality, it doesn't mean that when these things happen, we aren't knocked or ricocheted off into, let's say, more human emotional parts of ourselves. So I'm kind of doing a bit of a around the houses here, but I guess what I'm saying is, to me, the Atlantean energy and the Atlantean memory is to remind us that we are far more powerful than this human story that we're currently, many of us, here to help birth into a new energy while simultaneously healing ourselves. You know, so that's why, you know, I think if ever you, as someone who believes you're here to try and help usher in a new consciousness, if you ever start thinking you're important or more important because of that, you know, good old, your life will come along and put you right back into your, because it's simultaneous. We can be here as people who are holding a new vibration, and we are also here on our own healing journey. And there are people who are here on the planet that we directly benefit from their skills and gifts, even if they don't look like they're shifting the vibration of the planet. So I have gone a little bit all over the place. Sorry, I don't quite know where we
It
are.
was perfect.
No.
Okay, good. Good.
I would love to hear you talk as we evolve more about how our bodies will evolve. So the aging process, there seems to be, because of the life we're living, so many changes to our endocrine system and our hormones. So what did the Z's talk about in terms of in the next 10 to 20 years, how our bodies evolve?
Well, they talk a little in the book, and I can't remember all the details. You're fresher to it than me, and sorry, because I didn't know we were going to go into detail on the book today, I didn't refresh my mind. They talk a lot about the different technologies we're going to see over the coming decades that will be extraordinary in terms of advances for human health, not just fixing things, which I think is often the approach we have now. It certainly seems like we have some incredible innovations medically right now, but equally, I feel like we are 30 years behind in the way that people are treated, and we aren't educated about keeping ourselves healthy. Instead, it's like, this goes wrong. Okay, great. Here's this medical drug, which is wonderful if you need the drug. But in some cases, it's overdosing and it's not necessarily getting to the root of the problem. So we always need to look at health holistically. And the Z's said that that is going to become an even bigger thing in the future. I mean, personally, I pay attention to various voices in the health field that weren't available 20, 30 years ago. So I'm already living that reality in some ways. But I also think consciousness of aging and living well is changing. I've talked to so many of my friends about this lately. You know, I have a lot of friends in their 70s. I've always had older friends as well as some younger friends. So a lot of my friends are in their 70s now. And of course, you know, I know people in their 90s. And we've all said, what a relief that how aging used to be perceived is changing. Because I remember when I was a kid, the messages we were given were, yeah, hit 50. All you need to do then is wear gray and brown and go and sit in the corner. And we'll wheel you out at an annual party and you can say hello to the nieces and nephews. And I just remember that was kind of the messaging. And now that's just nonsense. And actually, you know, one thing the Z's have always said, which I love, is they talk about wisdom keepers. They say once you get into your 60s and especially your 70s, you become a wisdom keeper, meaning you have access to a longer passage of time in your body, a longer period of all the ups and downs. It's why I love my older friends who always go, don't worry, this is going to pass. I've always loved their mentorship around, they've seen it all before and they've seen the ups and downs. But more than that, there is also a level of consciousness that the Z's say your older years are supposed to afford you. And there is a reason that the pace of your body's energy slows down. However, I think that what we've seen in society with a lot of people who get sick as early as their 50s and 60s has been a lack of education to us as to A, what we need, and B, how to treat some of those symptoms we might have. So the Z's talk about a lot more scientific advancement and understanding about the body. But of course, what we also have to witness is what will happen with the medical industries. And the gatekeepers of those industries, some of those gatekeepers are going to have to be challenged to allow in health rather than just drugging people with solutions. And again, I'm a big advocate for both. I believe sometimes you need traditional medicine, sometimes you need holistic, but we do have a stranglehold right now on what mainstream people are told, and that's what we're going to see break down. And I think there's so many people already leading that charge.
Yeah, it reminds me of what you're saying of what you previously said about self-care, about it being maintenance rather than repair. And that's kind of the same model.
Yeah, one of the things I love that they talked about in regards to aging was they said the wrinkles. So they said, we look at wrinkles as this bad thing, but when we look at a tree, we see the rings on a tree and we see it as strength. And they said in the future human, that will be a sign of strength. And I really, really love that.
That sounds
Isn't
exciting.
it so? Sorry, go ahead.
No, that sounds exciting
Yeah.
because we're only getting older. So if wrinkles come into fashion, I was also excited to hear that. Yeah.
Well, and isn't it funny that as a society, I think this is one of our sicknesses, that we're all trained to value youth and the appearance of youth.
Yeah.
And you think, God, someone who, is there in their 80s, the life they've lived and what they hold and what they know. I love the consciousness of older people because whenever I'm around it, it feels more expansive. And so isn't it such a shame that we don't see that beauty? I love people who are unencumbered by their appearance.
Oh, me
You
too.
know, when you meet someone who they're just them, and they're not bound by, do I look good enough, or which so many of us were trained into. And again, that's another one of the movements on earth that I think we're seeing break down, thank goodness.
Yeah, there's so many things I love in the book about how we're going to change physically. One of which was how they talked about the chakras themselves are actually going to change. But I want to read a quote here, if I can find it. Yeah, this is from your partner. She said, the Z's continue to speak about how precious the human species is and will be in the future once the highest potential emerges. A species bound in flesh that no longer survives through competition and war, rather one that thinks with the heart and practices collaboration, a spiritually evolved human race. So I was thinking, as the heart, coherence, collaborative, that really resonated. As she said, one that thinks with the heart and practices collaboration. So I felt like we're in alignment with this future human. So
Beautiful. So true.
Yeah. So I don't really have a question there. Maybe my question would be just if you could talk a little bit about the Z's and how important they've said the role of the heart is in our, evolution.
It's interesting, they talk about heart energy being the currency of the future. This has come out a lot over the years, and I always pay attention to the messages that come out a lot because I've been doing this for 20 years now, so I've heard a lot from them over the years. And when I'm channeling, it's faster than when I'm speaking, usually. And heart energy is the currency of the future has been this continual message from them. I'll give you an example of when I first met the Z's, how I differentiated the power of their message was the way they made me feel, not what they said.
Mm.
So I met them on a tube train, the London Underground, where I was working at the time and living in London in my early 20s. I was 23. And I was literally going through all of my self-judgmental thoughts that morning, all the things that weren't working in my life, all the things that, I knew that critical self-talk very well. So I knew that voice. And I was beginning to work with it. I'd been going to some workshops, but still it got me by the throat that morning. And I remember very clearly having a thought about the relationship that I was in at the time, the person I was dating, and thinking, I was annoyed. And I thought that it was his fault, the guy I was dating. And literally they said, that's an interesting perspective, but you're wrong. And it was like, A, what's that voice? And B, and then they proceeded to explain to me why I was wrong and why it was my ego. And the minute they explained it, not only did I mentally understand what they were saying to me, I felt my body, which it was in my self-attack kind of energy, the heart wasn't open. I was kind of, because the heart can't be open when you're attacking yourself. That's a good thing to remember. If ever you're in self-judgment, it means your heart's shut down. So it's a good thing that often will talk us out of wanting to stay in self-judgment, So I remember just being like this, and then my body just opened, and it was, whoa, what was that? Like, how did that happen? And that was the repeated experience for me of working with disease, because their messages are designed to help you keep opening the heart. Now, sometimes one of their messages might give you a reaction because you need to clear something. But when I think of that first encounter with disease, I think of those times I'm with people when my heart feels calm and open. And the more I'm in that state, the more I know I have my faculties. Because if you think about it, the heart chakra, the Z's say it's the center of you. Now, it may not be the center of you if you measure your body from top of your head to your feet, but they say it's the center of you. And so when we are centered and our hearts are open, we think more clearly, we're more in flow, we have more available to be sensory in response to the world, which is the opposite to how we were trained as conditioned humans. So they speak about the path for all of us of coming more into our heart, which they say age will give you that gift if you are open. You can be shut down and defended and wounded and not having done any work on uncovering yourself, and you can be a pretty miserable old person because of that. But if that isn't your programming and you are, age will start to help you open your heart, because you will relax and you will open more. And they say that kids have open hearts, but it's different. They say their open hearts are not as adept at stillness because they have a lot to figure out in a short space of time. So they're very busy, they're very into everything. Things are big and can be very open and very joyous, but equally they can be the opposite. And as we grow and as we learn to maintain and work with this heart, we can start to expand more. So heart energy is the currency of the future, meaning that is going to be what more of us seek and create together and with each other.
I'd love to hear you talk more about what our current state is, collectively, in terms of what chakras we're mostly living from, and then how that evolves and how relationships will change.
Well, it's an interesting question. It's not anything I've ever really stopped to think about. What chakras are we mostly living from? But I will say that what we've just been through this month of November, we were in the base. We were in like the lower. We were in the lower chakras, and they were busy, and so it's interesting. Let me just take a moment to see if. So they said most humans operate from the mind and the base. Doesn't mean most people in a community like this will, because a community like this will be higher in heart, third eye. Interestingly, communities like this, the biggest chakra to open is the throat
Mm.
because of fear of persecution from past times where you may have been vocal or verbal about what you were connected to. Because we still live on a planet where there are lots and lots and lots of groups that are saying that spirituality is wrong. If it's not going through organized religion, it's wrong. So there's a lot of conflict around spirituality on earth. It's not just, oh great, spirituality is wonderful. It may be to you and your groups, but there's still a lot of conflict around spirituality. But the Z's said most people are living from the mind and the base, and they pop into the heart sometimes and other parts of the chakra systems, but what you're really looking for, they're saying, is for all of them to be able to operate equally. And at this moment in history, the heart is what's required to help bring all of the others into more balance. That's the key chakra for our generation. And they're saying that will remain true for at least the next 20 years.
One of the things that I found fascinating was their talk about AI. And they said that AI has been around before and we're actually very familiar with it. And it's not going to take us over like people are fearful of, because that's just not how it's going to unfold. So could you speak to a little bit about, you know, how you've interpreted their take on AI in the future?
Yeah, I found it very interesting that they spoke about AI as a manifestation of spiritual intelligence. They did caution, they said, like any form of anything, depending on how it's used and what the intention behind it is, will be what will play out energetically. But what they did say is that it can't be that AI becomes a weapon against humanity. They said it will not be able to go that far simply because of the levels of consciousness, which is some of the fears that I had heard out there. And Regina, AI, because we did these recordings a little over a year ago now, and I was still not really overly researching AI or anything. So when Regina wanted to go down that road, I thought, well, this will be interesting. But it did make sense to me when you think of telepathy and when you think of one of the things that the Z's will often speak about is oneness. And they will say that oneness is a dimension that we know, that we have come from, where everything is connected. So they spoke about AI as having a certain level of psychic consciousness. And there were lots of other details because if I'm not mistaken, Regina asked quite a lot of questions.
Oh,
She's
yeah.
she's very good at driving in a direction and then asking multiple questions. In that, you know, she's so brilliant at what she does that I'm forgetting some of the details. Carl, maybe you could enlighten us as
Yeah,
to because you, yeah.
I was blown away. Like I skimmed through that part, but it was basically like AI has been here and it almost made it feel like it's an entity in itself that has just visited our planet in past times, and it's been very helpful to certain things, and it made it seem like it wasn't bad, and we are very familiar with it in our like at a cellular level, which was cool.
It's interesting because, you know, I think AI has been one of the threats in people's conversations, you know, when there are
Yeah.
things that people like about the future and there are things that people feel threatened by. And what they have said a lot, and I've really heeded this because they've been saying this for a decade and I've watched it play out. Be careful that your worst fear about the future is not a fantasy.
Mm.
They're saying, by all means, be vigilant and pay attention and monitor things that you think you should monitor. But be careful that you don't let your mind run into the worst case scenario that won't actually happen.
Mm.
They said, because the minute you start going that way, you help create it.
Yeah.
They said many, many years ago about conspiracy theories. They said, most conspiracy theories will have at least some truth in them. They said some won't have any, but they said the trick is not so much the information the conspiracy theory might be revealing to you, it's what the reporter wants you to believe, think, or do because of the conspiracy theory and the way they are slanting it. Now, we know that conspiracy theories have been labeled such. I mean, government forces have come out and said, we've been told to label this a conspiracy theory so that people back away from it or think that people are crazy and, you know, all the stuff that happens that we don't have to go into. But it is interesting to me that the Z's years and years ago, and this was even before 2020, when, you know, all of that ran amok, they said you have to be very vigilant because there isn't a piece of information out there that is either going to save you or doom you. They say this is a multi-dimensional universe and there is a lot happening all at once, and there is no one group that can control the earth. They said, in fact, there are multiple groups competing, and some of them are going to kill each other off, and you won't even know about it. It was just very enlightening to me to kind of, it's made me step back always and see what my body feels about information I get. And I certainly step back from highly emotionally slanted information, because when people emotionally slant information, we lose all perspective. So for example, I'll give you an example. So me just reporting something to you would be this. Today I did an interview with Kyle and Leah and their community, and I had a nice time. It's pretty neutral, not trying to get you to believe anything. Let's try this one. Today I did an interview with Kyle and Leah and their community. I had a really nice time. I mean, you know, like I use the exact same words, but two very different things. I want you to dislike Kyle and Leah and the community in this second. Now, I'm exaggerating. You don't get people on television quite reporting. Well, I'm probably wrong. No, they're probably. But you see my point, how energy infuses so much. And we've never really been trained to look at it that way. And you see this in journalism, you see this in reporting, you see it in political battles, you know, the whole thing. So yeah, I've tried to train myself to, if I have an emotional reaction to something, to step back and ask myself, is this mine, or did this person or this article ask me to take that in? Because I need to stay really clear.
Yeah. May we ask, we have so many questions for the Z's.
Great. I will take a moment to transition. Let me just get my crystal going here. Okay. So it might take a minute or so. So maybe if you guys want to just do I don't know, a short guided presence meditation or something.
Absolutely.
Everybody just take a nice deep breath. Feel your feet on the floor if they're touching. Feel yourself in your chair or where you're lying down. And just breathe into the feeling of slowing down. Focus your attention on your heart. Imagine your breath is flowing in and out of your heart, deeper and slower than usual. And radiate a feeling of love to everybody who's in this community, present or will be watching this. Send them love and care.
Good. A pleasure to be with all of you bright souls. You are a bubbly group, and we do not mean in personality, although of course there are some members of you here who are bubbly in personality. No, we mean you are bubbling with new potential. Yes, even those of you who think you are just settling in for a nice, slow last 10 or 20 years of your life. No, you are bubbling with potential. We are speaking to you at the end of the year of 2024, a climax year in many ways of the 7-year transition that you have been in as a world. And many of you will be watching or coming to this at the beginning of 2025, which is going to be a mastery year on Earth, a mastery year on Earth. This means your mastery will come to the forefront as individuals and as a collective. You could argue that you have been given mastery test after mastery test over the last 7 or 8 years on Earth, and to some degree that is true. But next year, you will become the embodied masters of Earth at a new level. It doesn't mean everyone will be at the same moment, the same position. That's not how it works. But it means more of you than ever before will be embodying your mastery of all, meaning mind, body, spirit, well-being, energy system, soul. So many of you are here to help usher in new consciousness on Earth at a time where Earth is going through one of its biggest battles when it comes to consciousness. Many of you have felt despair and even some deep grief around things that have played out in recent years. And you are not wrong to grieve, by the way. Whenever you grieve, you are actually, in some senses, recycling your energy field for the better. So you are letting go of old stagnant pockets of energy inside your body that will cause discomfort if they aren't released. So for example, when you grieve the death of a loved one or a friend or someone who perhaps has not died, but perhaps a friendship changed or something shifted that you didn't necessarily want to shift or feel the pain of the shift afterwards. Your grief is you letting out the parts of your energy field that had become connected to and attached to that thing or person. And that's what you're supposed to do, by the way. You aren't supposed to practice complete detachment from people, places, and things that you are connected to. You are supposed to merge with them. You are supposed to connect with them in whatever connection looks like for you. For some, it's deeply immersive. For others, it may look a little more distant, but they are still connected to this person, place, or thing. Or when the person, place, or thing disappears from your life or from the earth, the grief that you go through, at whatever time you are ready to start grieving, because for some, the grief might take a year or two to begin. At that moment in time, you start releasing from your energy field all that you had held on to in that relationship, because there is no longer anyone else to hold it down with you. So if you are grieving the loss of a person and the person is no longer in your life for whatever reason, you are imbalanced in your energy now, while you have not yet grieved and, we will say, renewed yourself, your energy. Because once the grief has been felt, the tears, the pain, the sadness, the loss, the energy resets and comes back into your body. It is no longer a section of you that needs to be shut down. Well, we will say that many of you over the last 2 to 3 months, or certainly the last couple of months of the year of 2024, grief is and has been a theme. It's you letting go of old ideals, old ideas, old hopes and wishes. And you letting go of an old hope doesn't mean there is no hope. It means you're going to create a new version of hope. There will be something new, but for many of you, when you are clinging on to relationships, places, things to keep you afloat, when you lose significant ones, or perhaps too many of them in a short space of time, it can be very destabilizing. You can feel bereft or lost or disconnected inside yourself. And as you can all attest, there comes a point in that period where you get released from the grief. You may never forget the loss. You may frequently wish that the person, place, or thing was back in your life, but that is different to being caught in grief. Well, we will say that your society is just about finishing its grief around what we would call this major shift over recent years. We're not saying there won't be individualized grief all along the way, things that come along that you have to let go of or feel loss around. But you are now ready to come into your mastery, and in fact, you are required. Never before has your earth looked quite so chaotic to most of you in this generation. There have been times, yes, but the chaos is the most staggering thing to many of you. Well, what is the, shall we say, positive side of chaos? Multidimensionality. So you see, the shadow side of chaos is none of you trusting that everyone knows which way to walk at the same time, or that there is no longer unity. And we understand your concerns about division and separation that chaos can create. But chaos is also an example of multidimensionality. It's an example of how different you all are. And there are some of you who've been waiting for the rest of the world to get it, hoping that enough people will wake up. Well, guess what? You're sick of that wait now, some of you, and that's where you needed to get to. You needed to understand that your job here on earth is not to see a specific outcome and be the creator of that specific outcome. Your job is to contribute towards an outcome, not knowing at what point on earth it will ever manifest in the way that would please you. So for example, you may say, oh, I wish to see a peaceful world. And we will say to you, you will see a peaceful world regularly while you're alive. You may not see a fully peaceful world before you die, but you will contribute towards the energy of peace while you are here. And therefore, what you are doing is feeding peace. So the mastery for many of you now is, where do I want to use my energy, send my energy, serve my energy, feed my energy? And some of you, by the way, are quite pissed at your spiritual path. Yes, we use that word very consciously. Some of you are annoyed at your spiritual path, wondering, well, what was this all for? Where has this got me? I thought I'd have been a much more powerful manifester of peace by now. And again, we'll say, don't worry, your spiritual path hasn't deserted you, but you did have a mental identification with it that you are now growing out of. It served you up until now to have an idea that spirituality would in some way either protect you or support you in manifesting and creating what you want to see in the world. And perhaps you're going to let those beliefs go, and you're going to come back to a greater truth, which is you are consciousness in a human body, which is a gift. And the gift of this human body will last as long as your human body is supposed to stay alive. And for some of you, that will be 125 years. And for some of you, that will be 25 years. So stay alive while you are alive. Don't think you're watching a television show that you're waiting to see what happens in the next 10 years. You might not be here for 10 more years. You might, but don't live that way. Participate. And by the way, for you, participating might mean turning the news off for the next 10 years and doing art in your home. Participating doesn't mean you have to become a peace activist in the world. You might be exhausted of that. You may have served your time. Now it's time for other people to take your role. You're going to serve peace by focusing on as much positive energy as you can, when you can, authentically, and creating that for others. So we are aware there are questions for us, so we do not want to take up more time with our own messages. We will see where you would like us to respond to you.
How does the youngest generation who are being born and growing up right now amid these rapid shifts factor into the creation of the future human?
Well, in many ways, they are designed to be the future human, but they have a little bit of an obstacle course to get through. It's why your younger people seem wired very differently to some of you, especially the older you are. The older you are, the more you will be shocked at what the younger generation is now. And we know that humans like to come up with things like, well, they were a mollycoddled generation and they're entitled and all of these personality words. But actually, it's far deeper than that. We're not saying that those things can't be true in certain cases. No, they are faster. They are faster and they are wired for multidimensionality, which means it is harder for them to go at slower speeds. And in fact, many of them who are, shall we say, growing up in households or perhaps in places in the world where they feel like they can't fully express their multidimensionality, they are suffering right now. They are suffering with some of the energy templates on the planet that are trying to serve them purely technological life. You see, one of the things that your generation is going to grapple with, is already grappling with, but it will come more into the fore in the coming years, is the balance between technology and biology. There is an organic pulse that comes from your biology. It's very different with technology. And for example, you could take one child and surround them with people and love and community and organic experiences, both biological humans, but also other species and nature. And then you could take another child and lock it in a warehouse and feed it technology for 20 years and limit its human biological nature or other sentient being interaction. You would get two very different children at the end of that 20 years. Now, the fusion of technology and humanity is part of your next phase, but is it being used to enhance not just humanity, for this planet is far bigger than just serving the human species? Is technology being used to further enhance this planet, or is it being used to further enhance financial agendas or agendas of control and power? And the answer at the moment is the latter. And that is because you, the people, are not, shall we say, in charge enough. That is why you are grappling with such clearly low vibrational energies right now within leaderships around the world. There are many leadership members around the world. There are people who are trying to bring the light into those systems. But there are many who have, shall we say, maintained a stranglehold on it for many, many decades. You are in a period where that is all set to change. It won't be an easy change. And the younger generation are far less, shall we say, emotionally perturbed by all of this than the rest of you. So if you look at people who are, let's say, 30 and down, they have a different form of consciousness. So this would be people who were born in 1995 onwards. They are people who are different to those who are beyond that time, were born earlier. They have a little more of a step towards the young children of now. But if you are speaking about children who have been born from, let's say, 2015 onwards, that is an entirely different life form, meaning they are faster, they are wired in a more sensitive way. So some of you are thinking that children these days have real issues. Well, they are born onto a planet that is far more complicated. There are more toxins on this planet. There is more radiation on this planet. There are more issues that they are going to be the generation to help clean up. So, as we always say, never leave it to the children. We have heard some say, oh, the children are going to sort this world out. Oh, do not abandon your children in that way, and do not put yourself down. If you're a wisdom keeper, you're here to help the children, or the grandchildren, or the young people you come across. And you might say, well, they're not interested in me. And we'll say, well, find the ones who are. You're only finding the ones who see you a certain way. The ones who are open will not see you that way. They will see you as another being, and they'll just recognize you're in an older body, but they won't write you off. So if you say, well, the only children I've met are X, Y, and Z, we say, you're not getting out enough. Because there are some incredible beings that are being born at this time, but they are in many ways, and we don't like using this word. In fact, Lee just tried to censor us from using this word, but we have to use it. They are a little more primed for the energetic war that you are all in right now. There is a battle that is going on, that has been going on for some decades, but it has really surfaced in the last 5 or 6 years. There is a battle on the planet that plays out between the old guard of power and new energy. That is a battle that has played out not just on this planet, in many planets across time. And you are at a pivotal point for Earth. Now, most people might think that sounds science fiction or far-fetched, and that's okay. They just aren't dealing with or aware of those dimensions of reality that we are speaking about. But the reason we bring this up is your children know what they're coming in for. They're coming in to be faster, to have to be more dexterous and more adaptable than you all were. So it's not better, it's just different. But they need you, and they need the continuum of your line in order to fully understand why they are here. That is why we always say it is one of the most bizarre things to us that it was possible to divide people from living more tribally on Earth. Some of your systems are set up to abandon your elders rather than revere and not just look after your elders, but learn from them and be with them. And many elders carry this wound of being forgotten or abandoned. That is society that did that. That is the structure of your society and the way you were all, shall we say, put into separate houses and separate families. We're not saying it shouldn't be that way, because it is that way. But we have always said you are best when you are tribal and you are communal. That is where your oneness lies. And we're aware that because of conditioning, tribal and communal gatherings are not always harmonious because people get into fights and opinions. We are aware of that. But when you find tribe and community that you do resonate with and that resonate with you, they are everything. So for those of you who feel lonely on Earth, make your one intention right now to bring community to you and to find community. We always say you don't need 10 good friends. 1 or 2 will be enough if they are truly good friends. And especially when you are lonely, 1 or 2 is enormous and will create a real shift in not just your experience of loneliness and life, but it will allow you to be you. Isolation, even for the highly introverted, can become dangerous. There are times you need to isolate to recover and repair. But if you stay isolated for too long, you start to lose the part of you that is here to connect and to share and to imprint on others and be imprinted. And of course, you do that with boundaries and discernment the more you spiritually grow. But for many of you, the isolation has become what used to be a safe place, now a dangerous place. And you have to know when it's time to come back out of the cave that you walked into to heal. Because if you stay in there too long, you will need to leave the cave in order to heal from the loneliness and the isolation that started to overshadow you once you had gone far beyond the point of healing. So even those of you that are introverted, you need to commune with nature, or in many cases you prefer animals to humans. That is good too. But you are here to sensorially connect, not to live a life of disconnection.
With that being said, it's good to hear from you again, Aziz. What ways can Leah and I help support our community in getting what they need?
Well, first of all, to take yourselves off the hook, because you're already doing it. And as you know, and many in your community know this too, there are times you can do things that you think are helping support another, and the person turns around and tells you off, and says, I don't want this, this is not for me. And you're very surprised because you're doing it with an open heart or well-meaning, but that person is either triggered by what you're doing, or that person is deselecting you. They are saying, you're not for me, you're not my medicine. And perhaps they're doing it in a slightly more abrupt or rude way than you would, but they're allowed. So what we would say to you and Leah, for we see that both of you have in the last 12 months alone done a lot of inner work on your own strength and your own resources. That is very clear in this meeting with you today. And so therefore, your community is doing the same. And those who do not resonate with that will leave your community. And those who need you to be the guides for a certain stage of that journey of strengthening, or perhaps they will be with you for years, they will come. What we will say to you and Leah is what we will say to anyone who is, shall we say, holding space for a community, whether it's holding space for a family of 5 or whether it's holding space for an online gathering of 5 million or 5,000 in a room. What's most important is to be as authentic, connected, and truthful as you can to the job you have agreed to do. And then what will be wonderful practice for you is to remember that even if most people receive exactly what it is you wanted them to receive, and perhaps are even kind enough to thank you for it so that you know, there will always be a few who will either want to attack you or what you're doing because they need a place to attack somewhere, or who do not resonate with you and might be disruptive toward you or toward others. See those moments as the little lessons, just as all members of this community also have to go through the lesson of, let's say, one difficult community member who perhaps screams during one of your gatherings in a very angry, aggressive way. And everyone is a bit shocked because they wouldn't do it that way. Everybody learns from that situation, but you don't have to hold on to that situation. The most important thing to understand is when someone tells you they don't want you or need you, believe them and move on. We know that can be hard when it is someone you've been with for a while. We know that can be a pain in relationships when you yourself hadn't realized that the alignment between the two of you had changed. But that is the only advice we need give you, for the two of you are doing exactly what you came here to do, and you will continue to offer it for many, 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 many years, and it will continue to bloom and grow, partly because of your growth and partly because of collective growth. You are here to respond to what people need you to bring through, as much as you are here to bring through what you feel compelled to bring through. And that is the truth for most way showers, whether they are doing that for 4 people in their life or 40,000.
There is so much talk nowadays about gender or transgender issues. And, there's an idea sort of bandied about that maybe women and men are kind of the same. I'd love to hear about how gender will evolve, and also how we are bound into a human body and how that connects to our human experience and our hormonal experience.
Well, this is a very interesting topic, and it is one that did get addressed in the conversations with Regina's, but we are glad you are bringing this up because it is an important topic. Firstly, anyone on your planet who identifies as transgender or chooses to identify as transgender, it is not our belief that that person should be destroyed. That is the most important message we can give you, first of all. But it is the belief of certain groups on your planet, much like you have seen racial cleansing, gender cleansing, sexuality cleansing. You have seen groups on the planet target other groups and decide that they are less than, or they should not be allowed, or they should be destroyed. So whenever you are looking at any of these, shall we say, transgender or gender-based issues, look through the lens of, is this a discussion that is healthy and helpful? Or is the undertone to this discussion that this person shouldn't exist, should be devalued, is less than others? And you will see that many are holding that latter perspective in their discussions. We did go so far as to say, in answer to Regina's questions, that we do not believe it is a good idea for young people, particularly those under the age of their early 20s, to go through too many biological modifications for a couple of reasons. Number one, the human biology has not finished its natural process until the early 20s, but also there will be some who will change their perspective. So for example, there will be some who at the age of 13 in a what was born a male body believe they are a girl. But by the early 20s, the definition of their gender will not be as important to them anymore, meaning they will not seek to modify their body. They will instead just recognize they do not identify with traditional male and female stereotypes, which is part of the issue for many in this world. So we understand this is a complex argument, but again, we will take it back to part of the reason this is happening is because you have a lot of distortion on your planet when it comes to gender roles. So the irony is that the ones who are pointing the most aggressive finger at transgender issues are the ones who are living in distorted gender roles themselves. It will be the ones that you know as the alpha males, or the ones who want to be females with alpha males. It is a certain consciousness. And as we have said, why spend your life trying to deny someone else's experience of life? What a waste of your time. That is a battle energy rather than a energy of love and let live. But within that, what we will tell you is a lot of these issues have become what you would call politicized and used. So you are seeing a community get targeted as a way of distracting you from other issues that might be going on. And we have said that all along. Whenever you are being asked to focus on a very emotionally loaded issue, and it is very inflaming to people, you need to ask yourself, what else is going on in the world this week that we aren't being shown or that's being concealed from view by this very heated argument? So for us, we will finish with this. From our perspective, your genders really are irrelevant on a soul level. And there are many of you walking today who identify as different kinds of sexualities, heterosexual, homosexual, bisexual, all of these different labels, it doesn't really matter, that you do not overly identify with your feminine energy or your masculine energy, and you do not believe that just because you're born into one body, you have to behave in a stereotypical way. And there is no stereotypical way anymore. It's changing. It's why some of what we will call the alphas are a little agitated right now. Those who want to hold on to old societal roles of male, female, they're agitated. They don't need to be. They can have their life in that role. They don't have to try and kill off everyone else that they see that's different to them. But what we will say is fixed gender in the body really is not a conclusion for the soul. Yes, being a woman and being able to have experiences that women in this time have is an experience, and the same being a man. But from our perspective, the body is the home, and the body is the house through which you get to express yourself through the world. And if you were living in a far more enlightened time, none of these arguments would matter, and none of these arguments would be of concern, because there would be no fixed roles. People would be allowed to be whoever they are. And what you are seeing right now is a fight over who people are allowed to be or not, and a minority group on your planet that do not have power or resources the way that many of the majority groups do are being targeted. And that has to be said. So you may be drawn into an intellectual argument about transgender issues, but you were speaking about human beings. Never forget that. These are human beings who are having an experience that's very confusing for them in some cases, and that they're trying to understand. And it's not an easy path that they have chosen. They have not chosen an easy path if that is the path they are walking. So some compassion is required, and some critical thinking is required whenever you are being swayed against those groups.
How will humans of the future utilize their hearts?
It is going to depend on what timeline humans achieve more heart consciousness. There are a few different possibilities. It could be as soon as 20 years from now that you are living in a radically different world where the heart consciousness is concerned. And some of you may say, 20 years, that seems forever. Well, think back to 2004 or 2005. It's not actually that long ago. So actually 20 years is quite a quick passage of time. The longer timeline is beyond 50, into the 50 or 60 time frame. So it's really going to depend on where human consciousness drives. It will arrive. It's just hard to pinpoint exactly what window of time it will, shall we say, finalize in. And remember that there can still be conflict on the planet when there is more heart consciousness. It will take time for some of those conflicts to die out. And some of them will never completely, there will always be a few small subgroups. But what you are experiencing at the moment is a push to dominate with conflict energy. You are experiencing a smaller number of people in power on the planet pushing to dominate conflict onto human beings rather than heart coherence, heart community, collaboration. So they are much smaller in number than they appear, like anyone who stands on a box and shouts louder than everyone else in the room. They appear to be very dominant, but actually it is just the size of their, shall we say, in this case, resources and position, but more importantly, the size and the effect of their voice. Over the last 6, 7, 8 years, many humans have become scared. Many humans have become scared of this energy. That's about to change in 2025, and it won't change for everybody. There will still be people who are afraid. But more of you are no longer going to be afraid, and you're going to say, no, we do not accept this, no. And more of you saying no in the areas that you don't accept is what it's going to take. So there will be trigger events that will lead larger groups to do this. It will require trigger events, just as there have been many trigger events over the last 7 or 8 years that have woken many up.
How are our money systems going to evolve?
Well, first of all, they need to become more equitable. Your money system is very cleverly designed, like a casino, to keep most people in the loser's seat. So, what needs to shift on your planet is more of an understanding of how that system has been designed to make people struggle. Now, many are able to rise through the money system, and they are able to shift their financial circumstances. And we know in the spiritual community, there are many who work on abundance, and that is a theme for some of you. And some of you might be working on it because you recognize you come from a generational line of hardship. Or perhaps you're a healer and you've got that strange belief in your head that you aren't allowed to charge for what you do. And we would say, well, if you're a rich person or you don't need anything, don't charge for what you do. That's wonderful. If you're not, and if you actually need money as the energy source for life, then you're a fool to not charge. Because how on earth can you be a good healer if you don't know how to keep yourself alive on earth? And we don't mean to be harsh. We are just tired of watching so many of you struggle with that argument. So money is simply a resource on earth. And you all have been put into a system where money has been turned into how you stay alive in many cases. Now, there are some who've managed to successfully get out of the money system, but they are the minority. And there are some who've managed to make enough that they don't have to think about it anymore, but most are not in that place. So firstly, your system has been set up to be unfair. Your system has also been set up to conceal from you where money is being spent for deathly purposes. And that is something that is coming to light more and more. Why is it that people in your countries are suffering, starving in some cases, while enormous amounts of money are sent towards wars and battles that are usually transfers of power, transfers of finance between countries? So you see, there is a disconnect between people and the system, and that is what is about to change. The disconnect between people and the system is about to change, and it did get you to a certain point. We don't want to completely rubbish your system here. We're just saying that the disease in your system is becoming clearer than ever for more than ever before. And that is what was required in order for the tide to turn.
Thank you. What advice would you give us on how to properly integrate with AI?
For some of you, we would not give you that advice because some of you will not want to integrate with AI and you will manage to live the rest of your life without really doing it. And no, we're not just speaking to those of you who think you've only got 10 or 20 years left. Of course, AI is going to become a part of your society, but it's not so much how you need to integrate with AI. We would say the first thing is going to be the ethical question around AI for the collective to answer. How is AI being used? Is it serving? What are the costs to humanity around AI? And are you aware of those? So we can't really answer your question without first addressing the societal issue of AI. And that is going to be an ongoing global conversation. And there will be many brilliant minds who understand both the brilliance of technology, but also perhaps some of the areas of concern, who will lead those conversations. And you can pay attention to those and join in on those as much as you want so that you can be an educator in your group. Because for many people, they are tired, exhausted, either overworked or struggling. They don't have time to consider whether they think AI is ethical. They don't have time to consider whether or not the system is helping them or harming them. They're just trying to survive. What we will say is, the more AI is incorporated in positive ways, the more the consciousness of AI will start to represent humanity as a whole. It is no different to those people who fear AI will be used for evil purposes. Well, humans have been used for that same purpose, but not all of them. And we use the word evil very lightly. We are aware because of religious connotations that evil has a certain meaning to you. What we mean by evil is destruction. That which is designed to destroy rather than connect. That which is designed to blow holes in unity consciousness. So that can always be healed later and repaired. But of course, major destruction has a major impact. And sometimes it's what's needed to shake people awake. But AI is going to be more than one thing. It is going to be used for very positive, very helpful things by those who hold that intention. And of course, it is going to be used for the opposite by other people. So we would say, see AI as no different to many other aspects of your world. But it is new technology for this generation, at least in this form, and it is imprintable. So you are in the early imprint phase of AI. And what will happen over the next 5 years with AI will set up the role of AI in the future. So we would say, do not be scared of it, but equally pay attention to it and decide on it for yourself and see where you think it might be helpful. For there are ways it can be very helpful.
Would you please close with a message for the Heart Coherence Collaborative community and anybody else whose heart is listening right now?
Yes. Well, we will say this. Some of you are exhausted right now. Exhausted. That's okay. Allow yourself to be exhausted. Allow yourself to feel worn out. Allow yourself to be saying things like, I am done with all of this. We understand, and this is part of the process. It's inevitable that you would find yourself here because many of you do not want to continue, not just with the old story of Earth, you don't want to continue with the old story of your relationship to Earth. You need change, you want change, but you have no energy to make that happen without first releasing all the parts of you that you have gone through. And even for those of you who are experiencing this in early 2025, exhaustion will actually be a theme for about 40% of you. And there's nothing wrong with exhaustion. The only problem with exhaustion is when you don't realize you're exhausted and you try and do things that make you worse. So this is a time for compassion for many of you, allowing yourself to recover, allowing yourself to take a breath, allowing yourself to recognize the enormity of being a human on this planet. It is not for the faint of heart. Yes, we can tell you it's what you chose to come here and do, but that doesn't mean it's all sunshine and rainbows, and you don't need us to say that to you. You're very clear about this. So that's the group with exhaustion. Now we're coming to those of you who are feeling the possibility of a new time, a new life, a new phase for you, a new phase for the earth. Good. These are the fertile seeds in which new growth can occur. So as you create new life for you, you also contribute to the collective new life for the planet, and that's important. So those of you who are here for possibility, good. Be a good guardian of that energy of possibility. Don't let it get frittered away on people, paths, things that aren't going to help build what it is that you are here for. So an example would be, you feel very optimistic about a new way of being on Earth, and someone comes along and says, yes, I've got the same vision, here it is. Pay close attention. When they show you this vision, does your mind go, oh good, well I should probably join this then because we've both got a vision for a better Earth? Do you let your body tell you how you feel about this person's vision? Because if you let your body tell you, your body might go, no, this is not for me. I'm good for you that you're doing this, and I'm glad you're out there doing this, but this is not my path. I cannot join forces with you. My possibility has to collaborate with someone else. So when you feel possibility, it is a fertile time, but much like a mother who has a baby inside her, she gets more sensitive and more protective because she is protecting the possibility of her baby. She is making sure that she is creating a safe space for this baby. So possibility is a wonderful energy, but has to be used with wisdom and discernment, not naivety. And finally, we'll come to those of you who are feeling freer than ever before. And you have listened to many of these words with mild bemusement, not because you horribly disagree with anything that we or Leah or Kyle have said, but simply because the words don't mean that much to you. You don't really need the words in the story to navigate anymore. Well, you're in a group that are, yes, perhaps a little more, shall we say, a light touch when it comes to the story of being human, or the mind and the stories the mind creates. Don't be surprised if, particularly from March of 2025 onwards, you don't ground into your humanity in an all new way. And at first, you might wonder if you're regressing. You might wonder if, oh, this is strange. I thought I was a bit lighter than all of this, and I feel like I'm going back to some old thoughts. You'll only be going back to them to clean up some parts of your energy field that you want to ground into now. It was appropriate for you to lift out of your body for a while to really stabilize this new level of a way of seeing and thinking and feeling about the world. But now you're going to come back into your body a little bit so that you can reclaim grounded parts of it so that you can be more powerful. So remember, the process is rarely linear. You are rarely ascending up and then staying there. You ascend up in yourself, then you drop back down. You clean up a little bit more of your physical, energetic vibration so that you can use it on Earth and put your energy weight behind it. So you are all in different places, and we have just taken some broad strokes on 3 of the groups in your community. But what we will say to all of you is, yes, we understand there can be dark days in your life, or for the planet, or for the people in your local area. There can be very difficult things that come along. But there is always light too. And light will follow the difficulty. And sometimes light will appear on days where the difficulty is burning at its hardest, just to keep you going. So, do not tell yourself a story that the world is doomed. How do you know that truth? And if you tell yourself that story, you will help to not only create it, but more importantly, that's the reality you will create for yourself. And that's the prison you will live in. This Earth experience is far from over for humanity, far from over. And in fact, you are just going through a radical shift time, which, by the way, will not always feel good, and nor should it. You're not supposed to be able to just bypass your human feelings and just spiritually say, well, everything is wonderful and it's all happening for the better. Now, some of you can do that and you can maintain that for a long time, but don't give yourselves a hard time if on other days you aren't feeling so good. That is called healing. That is called clearing, and that is called re-energizing your energy field, recycling old energy so that it can become new. That is the path. And remember, when your time is up on this planet, you will not hesitate at a soul level to orchestrate your death. That's how it works. You aren't here against your will, even though some of you think you are sometimes. You are here because if you are still alive, you are meant to be. So get curious about what might be next for you to experience, even if that is as simple as I'm just going to pull down my curtains and shut my door for a month, and all I'm going to do is listen to my favorite radio program that uplifts me and paint and spend time with my cat, because that's all I have in me right now. That is not you necessarily hiding. That is you galvanizing yourself. And that is you filling your cup back up. And if you do practice something like that, you will be surprised how different you will feel within days and certainly within weeks. Good. A pleasure to be with you all in peace, in love, in oneness, and as you would say, in heart coherence. Ha.
Yes.
Mm,
Thank you so much, Lee.
thank you.
And Aziz.
And Aziz.
Thank you, guys. Thank you, everyone on the community.
Yeah.
We only do this because we're all here, right? I wouldn't be doing this by myself. I might be personally channeling, but it wouldn't be that long or that in depth. So thank you all.
Yeah, I just want to say to anybody listening, I really mean this. If you can go get the book, The Future Human, it's amazing. I can't wait to read it again. It blows my mind. If you're into like channeling or, just learning about the future, anything that I've seen on the internet in regards to like, all these predictions, there's nothing even close to what this book has. And I really mean that. It's blown my mind. So,
Oh,
I know.
thank
yeah.
you.
Yeah.
And in 2027, the future human with Kyle Boyd and Lee.
Yeah.
Great. And I will say one thing as well. So what we did, so the book publishes in America. It's usually a little later in the UK and Europe and Australia. Usually, I'm not sure why, but they're normally a month or so later. But often what happens is the official date is March 18th, but usually if you order from Amazon or online booksellers, they tend to ship them towards the end of February. And usually the day they start shipping books ahead of the publication date, the Audible version becomes available. That's just how their system works. So by late February or very early March, the Audible version will be available. And those recordings are not me and Regina in a vocal booth narrating what happened. They are the actual conversations as they happened. Oh yeah.
Oh, wow.
I do that with all of my I had the conversation with the Z series with Diana Edwards. It's the same. When you hear the Audible book, you're hearing it as it was happening. And then what we do with the printed version is we just have a very light grammar tweak on certain things. So yeah, if you like listening and you like hearing it as it was happening, those are those recordings.
Awesome.
Oh, that would be so cool. I just listened to my Siri reading me the book. I love to actually hear the voice. I think it contains the frequency of it. I'm
Yeah.
gonna check that out.
Last thing is just you have an amazing community. We always see your courses and we send our community that way, and they always come back so ecstatic and grateful. So could you speak about your community and any way that our community could get involved with your community?
Right. Well, I've heard this a lot over the years, and I feel very grateful because my path was I became a student of self-growth and metaphysics from the age of about 15, 16. So first and foremost, I know what it is to be passionate about self-growth and spirituality. That's just in me and will be for the rest of my life. I think the community it's very diverse who comes to me because I do a few different things. So myself and Devor Bozique create spiritual healing music, and I've had people come from that side and go, oh, I had no idea you do all this other stuff. I just like the music. And then equally, there'll be people who maybe aren't into the music, but they love the Z's, or they like my energy teaching. And I also, because I've done this work for 20 years and I have a production team that I lead, I'm very passionate about helping other people who want to do this kind of work find their way with it. So I also train entrepreneurs in the healing space because I think it can be a minefield. And there's lots of things you go through around, can I do this? Should I do this? And also just the practical stuff. So I don't think my community is defined by one thing, but if I had to describe the people that I tend to always meet, they tend to be sensitives, empaths, intuitives, healers, and people who are very in their heart, which I'm always so grateful for because that's the kind of energy I like being around.
Yeah.
And also, like everyone else, days where we're struggling or we're not so in our heart. I just last week, not just because of all of the election stuff, but I had about 5 major events all collide in my life in 1 week. And I definitely went through quite a purge for like 5 days. That wasn't fun, but I knew what it was. I knew it was a release. And so I just had to go with it. But when I got back, was able to get back into my own heart again after about 6 days, which is easy for me to do for others or for my work, but for myself, there was like a 5-day period where joy and happiness were not allowed to come to me. That was not what I was working with. And it was really intense. But then when I was out of it, it came back. And I think all of us like that. So I would say the thing that I most notice with the community is people who celebrate the heart or want to be in the heart. And that doesn't mean they're all huggy people, because as the Z's say, there's love in action. There are people I know in my life who aren't the most effusive verbally, and they certainly don't want to hug you. But they are the first people to bring soup to your doorstep when you're sick. They are the first, so to me, love, heart energy is defined in many different ways, but I think it's usually people who are willing to care about others or animals or nature and see that as a calling on some level, even though, of course, we're all also just humans learning and living and healing alongside our calling,
Mhm. Well, everybody go join Lee's community. You're in great hands and we love you. Lee, thank you so much. Honestly,
Thank
thank you
you.
for everything you've done for our community. We really appreciate it.
Oh, not at all. No, you don't have to thank me. It's my pleasure to be here and with all of you. And thank you, everyone. I got to see a lot of you today. I'm just going to quickly, I'm just flicking across the screen. I can see photos, I can see videos. Hello, everybody. It's so great. It's great. Well, nice to be connected with all of you today. And I hope everyone has a good transition whenever you're watching this, whether you're watching this at the beginning of 25 or end of 24. I hope you can take some time for yourself, because there's certainly a chaotic energy in the world on many days. So we have to work to cultivate what we need to hold and connect to inside ourselves.
Yeah, that's great advice. Thank you, Lee.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody. We're sending you so much love.
We love you all. Thank you.